1 would be ideal. Okay, let's have a look. Let's go in a second. I'll duplicate the display. Okay. All right. So let's have a look at some of these questions. Okay, let's get rid of that. This will hopefully be working. All right, so first question is purely just about immunity. What does it mean to say a person is immune to a particular pathogen? What do we mean when we say we're immune to a pathogen? We think. Does it mean that we can't get infected? No, maybe. What do you think immunity means? What does immunity mean to you?
In my view, immune means our body itself produces the immunity power to resist the pathogen.
Yeah, so we produce antibodies to resist the pathogen. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's part of it for sure. Yeah. So immunity does mean that at some stage our body has produced antibodies against the pathogen. I agree with that. I think we need to take it a little bit further, just the next step. Maladi, do you have any ideas? What's your take on immunity? What do we mean when we say someone's immune? Not sure. Brendan, do you have any ideas? What do you think immunity means? Are you sure? Alexia, what's your take? What's your definition of immunity, do you think? Not sure? Help us out. What do you got? Good. Yeah. I guess the only point that I would make potentially, or like, I guess, yeah. First of all, like immunity doesn't mean we can't get infected. We can get infected still. That's not the problem. I guess you're both sort of no. I would say no. I guess you're pretty much there. I guess to me, immunity means one. We can get infected, but we tend not to see symptoms of a disease, right? So we tend to fight off a disease before we can become sick from it. I think immunity infers that we have produced that the lymphocytes have been activated and we have produced B and T memory cells against a particular pathogen. I think that's a really key because I think that's really what gives us immunity. Yeah, like we can produce antibodies at the time and that will kill off a pathogen in that instance, but that's no real different than passive immunity. Yeah, yeah. So that would be those cells that have actually been activated to attack a future pathogen. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, we get infected, we go through that primary immune response, and so therefore now we have those primed or activated B and T cells. So then for future infections, we can fight off the disease. Yeah. So I think producing antibodies is an important part of immunity, but in order to be, immunity to me means future protection, which is that memory B and T cells, which in the future will produce antibodies also, if that makes sense. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So to me, like producing antibodies is no different than getting an antivenom, like or to being passively injected by antibodies. Like, yes, you'll fight off that one case, but to me, to be immune means you're going to fight off future cases, which is where the memory cells come in. That's the key to it. And I think that sort of leads into that second question, right? The idea of active and passive immunity. We talked about active immunity means that we have activated the lymphocytes. It means we have produced memory cells against a particular pathogen. Whereas passive immunity means that we just have antibodies present for a particular pathogen, or we've been given antibodies to a particular pathogen, right? And so that's a really key distinction, because without that, I guess, the passive immunity part means that we will take care of the pathogen in that one case. Active immunity means we will have future protection because we've activated those lymphocytes. And that's a really key difference between active and passive. Yep. I like that. Yeah. That's a good, so that's a good way of putting it. So, so Alexia was just saying, so with passive immunity, we have no active role in the production of the antibodies. We are being given the antibodies, but our body hasn't actually done anything to produce them. I like that. I like that idea. We're a passive passenger, essentially, whereas we're not actively involved in the immunity. Yeah, I like that. That's a good way of putting it. Now, vaccination, keeping in mind immunity, when we talk about immunity, that can be either artificial or it can be natural. Either way is the same. Vaccination is a very important process. Okay. So, how does vaccination provide protection against a specific pathogen, do we think? What do we reckon? Melody, do you have an answer? How do you think, what does vaccination do? How does that provide protection against a pathogen? Yeah, I don't mind that idea. It trains the body to recognize it. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I'm happy with that. I'd be happy with that. So it's training us to recognize future. Yeah, I think. I mean, there's not a lot of room there. You might want to take it a little bit further, but I like that idea. I like that terminology, actually, to train the body. Yeah, it's a good way of putting it. It allows us to recognize future pathogens at the same time. Mm? Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. You're ready to go. Yeah, it's a good point. I like it. Anyone have anything else to add, or they want to give their view? I like that idea. Yeah, that's fine. So we also talked about in the vaccine part that sometimes it's not good enough just to get one vaccine, right? So you can't just get a single vaccine against some particular pathogen. Sometimes we need booster injections. We talked about tetanus being one, for example. We can't just get a tetanus shot when we're 5 and then that's great. We're immune to tetanus for our whole life. Sometimes we need a booster injection. Why do we need booster injections of vaccines? What was the reason? We talked about one of the reasons and the main reason. Alexia? Not necessarily. It's more because, and you're on the right track. It is part of that, but it is because some of our memory cells actually do die off, and they don't live forever because our body doesn't support. Cells aren't indefinite, so they can die. I think it's because it depends on where the memory cells and where they're stored. So some places get flushed out quicker, if that makes sense. So some memory cells end up in places where they can survive longer, whereas some don't. But yes, there's particular ones that just tend to die off really quickly for some reason. Tetanus and other things are the main ones. But yeah, there are. I think some boosters are for that reason. So we do tend to get. So when we're young, we might get like three boosters for whatever it is, MMR or whatever it is. Yeah, the meningococcal one. And I think that part of that is to get a greater response. I do think it's meningococcal. I think you get a few. I remember we're going through it now, babies getting stuff. But yeah, I appreciate, yeah, I think it is. And you're right. I think part of that is for that. I'm not really sure. It'd be interesting. I'll have to look it up. I'll look it up for you. But yeah, part of it is because they do die off. I'm not sure why some would. Yeah, totally. Yeah, that'd be good. You can help us out. It'd be great. But yeah, so some we need boosts. Some memory cells do die off over long periods, and we need more to produce and be stored in case of infection. Um, and so we do actually need more. All right, so we talked about immunity. We talked about vaccination. Okay, so vaccination, remember, is the idea of active immunity. Now we're sort of going into that passive immunity idea. So we talked about the fact that Australia, we have a lot of snakes, we have a lot of spiders. It's a pretty dangerous place. Um, you know, every year we have people die after being bitten by snakes. And so after a person's bitten, why do you think vaccination designed to stimulate lymphocytes would be ineffective? Because we just said vaccination gives us immunity, and it does. It's great. It gives us immunity against particular pathogens. So why would we not give a vaccine to someone after they've been bitten by a snake, do you think? Om, do you have any ideas?
Because our body cannot produce antibodies in a short period of time.
Yeah, that's it. It's all about time, right? We could theoretically be vaccinated against toxins and things from snakes, but you're right. This process takes weeks. Well, at least a week to 2 weeks to happen, right? To get to that point where we go through, we produce those memory cells, we produce antibodies ourselves, and produce memory cells. It takes quite a long time, and that primary response is very slow. Okay, and like we were saying, majority of poisonous snakes will kill you within an hour, within whatever it is. And so we just don't have the luxury of time when it comes to stimulating lymphocytes. It just takes too long. And so what do we do for those people? Melati, what would you do? If you got bitten by a snake, what would you recommend we do? Not sure. Brendan, do you have any ideas? You got bitten by a snake and they took you to the hospital, what do you think they would do for you?
An injection for you?
So give you an injection? Yes. It won't be a vaccine though. What would it be?
Maybe like cure.
Sort of, yeah. It's a form of a cure, I guess. You want to help him out? You just
Yes, to give antivenom.
yeah, we have anti-venoms against a whole range of different things. Yeah. Got the anti-venom, anti-venom, same thing. And you're right. So that's what we call. Continue. So that is what we call passive immunity, right? The idea that essentially they're just going to inject antibodies against that particular toxin, whatever it is, right? And so they're going to inject something that will neutralize the toxin straight away, okay? Because we don't need to go through that process of stimulating lymphocytes, which takes time. It just goes straight to the end result, yeah? The issue with that is that because we haven't taken an active role in producing memory cells, that's right. We don't have the memory cells, yeah? And to me, that's that difference in like the whole immunity thing. Like, yes, we have antibodies against that one snake right then, but in future we won't have protection. It doesn't matter. We won't produce, we won't stimulate the lymphocytes to produce memory cells. And that's why it's really important, remember, to, if you do get bitten by a snake or a spider, to try and recognize what type it is, because all spiders and snakes have different toxins. Yeah. And so you got to make sure, they say it's really critical. If you get bitten, try and recognize what it is, get some markings, because at the end of the day, a lot of these antivenoms aren't very widely, they're not widely used, and so a lot of places don't have a lot of them, and so it's really critical to know which type you need, because they don't want to just be injecting you with a whole bunch of different types of antivenoms. Yeah. It is a bit. Yeah. 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 It's sort of, I know, it's a bit rough. Yeah. So they are, but it can't be. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty weird. The whole thing is, I know, you sort of don't realize. It's interesting. I only really thought about that not too long ago, and yeah, I was it's they've got to come from somewhere. And you're right. Yeah, they just essentially use yeah, that's it. Just put a little bit of the venom in. They produce antibodies. They dilute and get the antibodies from their blood. It's a pretty crazy system, but hey, it works. It's handy. But yeah, so we have to get anti-venom. Yeah. All right. The next question is about sort of listing or putting 4 different examples into their correct category. So either natural or artificial, and either passive or active. Okay. So if we're exposed to a pathogen, all right, so we're just out in the open, we're exposed. I'm sick and he's got a cold and he coughs, and I come in, I breathe in his cold. Would that be natural or would it be artificial? Do we think? So if you coughed on me and I took in your virus particles, is that going to be a natural or is that going to be artificial? Yeah. Yeah. So exposure to a pathogen, is that going to give us natural or is that an artificial form of immunity? So we've got to put this into a category. So if we're exposed to a pathogen, are we going to get natural and active? I'm happy with that. That's good. Yeah, that works for me. So it's natural. All right. It's not an artificial means of exposure. I'm just catching it naturally. I'm going to go through the whole primary immune response. So it's going to be an active process. So it's going to be a natural active immunity. I agree. That would be our exposure to a pathogen. If we're injected with antivenom, what's that going to be? So it'd be artificial. Yeah. Sorry? Artificial passive. Yeah, I agree with that. Yep. So where it's a passive immunity because we're just being injected with antibodies, it's artificial because it's not by a natural means, it's being injected externally. I agree with that. Brendan, what do you think a typhoid vaccination, what sort of category do you think that would fit in? So if it's a vaccine, is it going to be active or passive if it's a vaccine? You reckon? Got to be active? Yeah, cool. So vaccines are active. It means we're going to go through the primary immune response. We're going to develop our own antibodies. Yeah. Is that going to be natural or is it going to be artificial if we're given a vaccine? You reckon? Yeah. Yeah, it's from an external source. It's artificial. I agree. Good. Yeah. Oh, you got it right. Artificial and active. Happy with that. Which leaves us, Alexia, what's breast milk? Where does that sit? Last slot. All the way over here. So it's going to be a natural and it's going to be passive, right? So we get antibodies through breast milk. Yeah, and we talked about how that's really important. Well, if possible, it's really beneficial to be breastfed by breast milk, just because it does give us that little bit of protection early in life. Yeah, not necessarily. If we're not exposed to the pathogens anyway, it's not going to make much of a difference. And there are a lot of people that are, can't be breastfed through breast milk, and they're fine, but it can't hurt. It does help us to develop an immune system a little bit quicker. Yeah. Cool. All right. So I feel like we're pretty good with that. It's got a few more. Why does passive immunity not demonstrate memory for a long-term protection, do you think? So why is passive immunity doesn't give us long-term protection? We sort of covered it in a few of these questions, I think. Alexia, do you want to help us out? He's just reading. It's fine. Good, great, yeah, I like it. So we talked about the idea that it doesn't train the body. It's only giving us antibodies that's going to remain for a very short amount of time. The antibodies do their work, it takes care of the pathogen, and then that's it. So it doesn't activate any lymphocytes. It doesn't activate memory cells. Yeah. And so in the future, if we're exposed to the same pathogen, we have to go through the primary immune response again. And so we're no better off. Okay. Question 6 was sort of like a bit of an extension-y thing. And if you haven't, if you don't know, that's fine. I just thought it was interesting. Has anyone actually caught a disease that you've been vaccinated against? Oh, really? I just thought, yeah. Just thought, and it's interesting. Like, it might have been one that you may not have got a booster for example. So a lot of people catch diseases later in life that they think they've been vaccinated for because they haven't bothered to keep up to date with their booster shots and to get re-vaccinated with certain things. Yeah. Yep. Yes. There's heaps. Yes, they do know. A lot of stuff out there. It's interesting. Or a lot of people might, for example, get the flu and they think, "Oh, I've been vaccinated against the flu." But just keep in mind, if you've been, yeah, that's the hope. Yeah. Oh, you've got to be careful if you go overseas. They have a lot of crazy stuff overseas that we don't. You saw, there are diseases in other countries that Australia doesn't have, and we haven't been. And the point is that because we don't have it in Australia, we're not routinely vaccinated against it. Yeah, that's some weird, crazy cures overseas, unfortunately. But part of it mainly is, they just don't have. A lot of places don't have the resources to be vaccinated against a whole range of things. So in terms of Australia, right? So in Australia, we have a range of different vaccines. Now, I did have a list. Here we go. I was looking. So in Australia, we get given a certain amount of vaccines, right? So we get a range of different vaccines as we grow up. Okay, and there's a range of different websites which give you a whole range of stuff. So generally, that went well. God, when we're growing up, we have what we call mandated vaccines, and so as we, up to like 5 years age or something, we get a range of different vaccines. What are some of the vaccines that we get when we're growing up? Do we know? These are extras. So these are ones that aren't actually mandated. These are extra ones. What are ones that we get that all young Australians will get, you reckon? Anyone know? What's one vaccine that you would have gotten? Wow, if you lived in Australia when you were younger, you would have had. This is not ideal. Horrible. You're not sure? I'm guessing you weren't born here, I assume. So where were you born? In where, sorry? Bhutan? So in Bhutan, do they have any mandatory vaccines? I'm interested, I don't know. Do you remember, or did you get any vaccines growing up? Sorry? Polio? You got polio when you were younger? Yeah. Do you any others that you know of? Malaria? Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? Like a lot of people don't know what vaccines they've got. Yeah, it's crazy. They really do. But and we're getting more and more. They're becoming, and these days, I've got a young son. He's 5 months old now, and yeah, they have to get a lot. Like even over the first few months, we've gone 3 times. Each time you have to get 3 different injections, and they don't like them. But yeah, so they have to keep getting like booster shots over time because it takes time to develop the immune system. So we get things like the MMR vaccines, like measles, mumps, rubella. We get tetanus. We get meningococcal now. We get what else do we get? Sorry, DTP, the diphtheria. Sorry, BCG. What's that one? Is it? What is it? I don't know that one. I'm not sure. You've seen it? You heard it? Okay. So we get the DD. Was it the DTP? It's like diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. Is it? Ooh, sounds tuberculosis vaccine. Interesting. So there's a range. There you go. Tuberculosis. I didn't know that one. So that was this, BCG vaccine. And there are a range of other ones. So if you do, so this is what's recommended. Far out. Go away. Just work. What's recommended in Australia? So for people that are coming to Australia, there's a range that are recommended. And people here, some people will get the Hep A and Hep B vaccines as well. DPT, yeah. So we get the DTP one. Just that's a mandated one now. So we get that. Everyone gets that when they're growing up. The rabies vaccine, we don't really have rabies much in Australia, but it's recommended for people that do come over. You never know. Yellow fever, apparently. Even things like, and so we get those routine ones: meningitis, polio. The TDAP, tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis one. The MMR, shingles. We got a whole range of different vaccines now. But yeah, and they're even talking about making vaccines mandatory. Well, they are mandatory for schools and things growing up. So, which I think is a good thing. People are fighting it. I don't know why. There's still quite a large, anti-vaccine group that are against it. Is what it is. Does make things hard though for the whole herd immunity thing. So that's all right. Anyone want to add anything to the discussion? Anything at all? I don't mind. Any questions?
Is that like a vaccine, or is that just something they have to do? Like if you have to live in the snow or something?
Mm-hmm.
I heard there was a vaccine, but I didn't know what sort of it was. Stay within the snow, or was it because?
Okay. I honestly, I don't know.
Living there, I didn't really get.
Are you talking like a specific area? Like, are we talking like
out with the Huskies where they live?
It's like Alaska and stuff.
They said they had a vaccine, but I didn't know what it was. Or like they.
I honestly don't know what the vaccine would be.
Maybe when they're older, maybe they have to 18-year-old. I don't know.
Maybe there might be a specific.
So they know when they die. Maybe I don't know. Might have been something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. There probably would be specific pathogens they have that we don't. I honestly, I'm not sure. Can have a look. Alaska vaccine? Yeah. Yeah, I'm not really sure, to be honest. I haven't heard I don't know much about.
I didn't read it, and when I got to read it, the thing went off the computer.
Okay.
Because it wasn't mine, I had to go somewhere. I couldn't find it.
Yep. Yeah.
Like a news article, like something paper.
Yeah, just sort of saw it around.
Maybe it was to keep their fluid going,
Maybe, possibly.
I don't know. Something about strength and fluid, but I couldn't work out why I was going to read it, and then I had to leave.
Yeah,
The
it's gone.
computer wasn't mine again.
Fair enough. Yeah, I honestly don't know. I'm not sure. Sorry. Yeah, wonder. I'll have to have a look. Anything else for the moment?